In the early morning hours of September 2nd, 2022, Memphis was still quiet. The city had not yet fully woken. Streets were dim, traffic was light, and the air carried the stillness that exists just before sunrise. In a residential neighborhood near the University of Memphis, a woman stepped out for what should have been a routine run. It was something she had done countless times before, something familiar and grounding. Nothing about that morning suggested that it would end in tragedy. Shortly after 4 a.m., Eliza Fletcher began jogging near her home. She was a teacher, a mother, and a member of a prominent Memphis family. She was also a private citizen doing something ordinary, trusting that the early hours would offer solitude and safety. That trust would be shattered in moments. Surveillance footage later showed a dark SUV slowing near her path. What happened next unfolded quickly. Eliza was forced into the vehicle, taken against her will and driven away. The entire encounter lasted less than a minute. There were no witnesses close enough to intervene. By the time the vehicle disappeared, the quiet morning had already given way to something irreversible. When Eliza did not return home, concern turned into alarm. Her husband realized something was wrong and contacted authorities. Within hours, the Memphis Police Department launched a full-scale search. Officers canvassed neighborhoods, reviewed surveillance footage, and issued alerts. The city's sense of calm was replaced by urgency. As the investigation began, details emerged rapidly. Police identified the suspect vehicle and traced its movements through traffic cameras. They located the SUV abandoned nearby and discovered evidence that confirmed the worst fears. Signs that a violent crime had taken place. The case escalated immediately. Authorities identified a suspect, a man with a prior criminal record, including convictions related to violent offenses. He was arrested within days. During questioning, investigators pieced together a timeline that was as disturbing as it was sobering. Despite the swift arrest, the most important question remained unanswered. Where was Eliza Fletcher? Search teams expanded their efforts, combing through wooded areas, vacant lots, and locations connected to the suspect. Volunteers joined law enforcement, driven by hope and determination. Vigils were held. Messages of support poured in from across Memphis and beyond. Parents hugged their children tighter. Runners altered their routes. The city held its breath. Days later, hope gave way to grief. On September 5th, authorities announced that a body had been found. It was Eliza Fletcher. The confirmation marked a devastating end to the search. For her family, it was the beginning of an unimaginable loss. For Memphis, it was a moment of collective mourning. As investigators continued their work, the case revealed a grim chain of events. Evidence showed that Eliza had fought back. Her strength and resistance were later acknowledged by prosecutors, not as a means of sensationalizing her final moments, but as a testament to her courage. The suspect was charged with kidnapping and first-degree murder. Additional charges followed as investigators uncovered more about his history and the failures that allowed him to remain free despite prior convictions. The legal proceedings drew intense attention. Questions arose about the criminal justice system, parole decisions, and how someone with a documented history of violent behavior was able to commit such a crime again. Public officials promised reviews. Calls for accountability grew louder. For Eliza's family, the legal process was only one part of a much larger reckoning. They grieved privately while also becoming unwilling symbols of a broader conversation about safety, violence, and responsibility. Friends and colleagues remembered Eliza not for how she died, but for how she lived. As a devoted teacher, she had shaped young lives. As a mother, she was deeply present. As a runner, she cherished the quiet hours of the morning that had once felt peaceful. Memphis responded in waves. There were memorial runs held in her honor. Schools held moments of silence. Conversations about public safety intensified, particularly around early morning exercise, lighting, and patrols. Some changes were implemented quickly. Others became part of longer-term discussions. The trial process moved forward methodically. Prosecutors laid out evidence. Defense attorneys challenged procedures. The court examined not only the crime itself, but the systems surrounding it. Each hearing reopened wounds for the family and community, reminding them that justice, even when pursued diligently, moves slowly. When a conviction was ultimately secured, it brought a measure of legal resolution. But it did not bring closure. No sentence could undo what had been taken. The verdict marked an ending in the courtroom, not in the lives of those who loved Eliza. In the months and years that followed, the impact of the case lingered. Runners continued to honor Eliza's memory. Advocacy efforts focused on preventing similar tragedies. Parents spoke openly about fear and vigilance. City leaders faced pressure to address systemic gaps that had been exposed. The Memphis kidnapping and murder was not an isolated story. It was part of a larger pattern that forces communities to confront uncomfortable realities about violence, prevention, and accountability. It underscored how quickly ordinary moments can turn into irreversible loss, and how fragile the sense of safety can be. For those closest to the case, memory became both burden and responsibility. Eliza Fletcher was remembered not as a victim alone, but as a person whose life mattered far beyond the circumstances of her death. Her name became associated with resilience, with love, and with a community's refusal to forget. As time passed, headlines faded. New stories took their place. But for Memphis, the morning of September 2nd never fully disappeared. It remained present in altered routines, in quiet moments of reflection, and in the shared understanding that vigilance is not paranoia, but awareness shaped by experience. This story does not end neatly. It does not offer simple lessons or easy solutions. What it offers instead is a reminder that safety is not guaranteed, that systems must be examined honestly, and that behind every headline is a human life, with relationships, routines, and dreams that deserve to be remembered with dignity. The Memphis kidnapping and murder left a permanent mark on a city, but it also revealed the depth of compassion, solidarity, and resolve that can emerge in the face of tragedy. And that, too, is part of the story. As the city processed the news of Eliza Fletcher's death, the sense of shock did not dissipate. Instead, it settled into something heavier. For many in Memphis, the crime felt deeply personal, not only because of who Eliza was, but because of how ordinary the moment had been. A woman running before sunrise. A routine so common it had never required a second thought. The randomness of the act challenged assumptions people held about safety, predictability, and control. In the days following the discovery of her body, investigators continued assembling a precise timeline. Surveillance footage from across the city was analyzed frame by frame. Traffic cameras, private security systems, and license plate readers were cross-referenced to confirm the suspect's movements before and after the abduction. Each data point narrowed the window, removing ambiguity and solidifying the sequence of events. Police confirmed that the suspect had been linked to the crime through multiple forms of evidence. DNA collected from the scene matched records already in the system. Physical evidence recovered from the abandoned vehicle reinforced investigators' conclusions. There was no indication of an accomplice. The crime, brutal and calculated, had been carried out by a single individual. As the legal case developed, attention turned increasingly toward the suspect's criminal history. Public records revealed a pattern that troubled many observers. Prior convictions, including violent offenses, raised immediate questions about parole decisions and supervision. How had someone with this background been free to commit such a crime? What safeguards had failed? Officials responded by announcing internal reviews. The Department of Corrections faced scrutiny over monitoring practices. Prosecutors examined whether previous sentencing and release decisions had adequately accounted for risk. These discussions extended beyond Memphis, feeding into a national conversation about recidivism, rehabilitation, and public safety. For Eliza's family, these systemic questions existed alongside a private grief that could not be legislated away. Friends described a household suspended in mourning, surrounded by support yet forever altered. Eliza's husband spoke publicly only sparingly, choosing to honor her memory through action rather than words. Her children became the silent center of the tragedy, their future now shaped by a loss they were too young to fully understand. Community response evolved as shock gave way to resolve. Runners organized memorial events that doubled as calls for awareness. Advocacy groups focused on personal safety, lighting, and community patrols. Conversations about early morning exercise habits became common, especially among women. What had once been a solitary and peaceful activity was now discussed in terms of risk assessment and contingency planning. Law enforcement agencies responded with visible changes. Patrol patterns were adjusted in some neighborhoods. Public messaging emphasized situational awareness without encouraging fear. Officials walked a careful line, knowing that excessive alarm could fracture trust while silence could feel dismissive. As the case moved toward trial, prosecutors prepared to present evidence that left little room for doubt. The narrative was not built on speculation, but on corroborated facts. Defense arguments focused on procedural challenges rather than disputing the core events. The courtroom became a place where the details were formalized, spoken aloud, and preserved in the record. The trial itself was emotionally taxing for all involved. Family members attended selectively, balancing the need for justice with the cost of reliving the worst moments of their lives. Each hearing reopened wounds, yet also reinforced the seriousness with which the state was pursuing accountability. When the verdict was delivered, it marked the end of one chapter. The suspect was convicted and sentenced. The legal system had spoken, but justice, in the emotional sense, remained complicated. The sentence acknowledged harm, but it could not restore what had been taken. No ruling could return Eliza to her family or erase the fear her death instilled in the community. In the aftermath, Memphis continued to reflect. The crime became a reference point in discussions about urban safety, criminal justice reform, and the responsibilities of institutions tasked with protecting the public. It also became a cautionary tale about how past decisions echo forward, sometimes with devastating consequences. Over time, public attention shifted, as it often does. New headlines emerged. Other tragedies demanded focus. But for those connected to the case, memory did not fade. Eliza Fletcher remained present in the city's consciousness, her story retold not as a spectacle, but as a reminder of vulnerability and the importance of vigilance. Schools where Eliza taught remembered her as an educator who cared deeply about her students. Colleagues spoke of her commitment and kindness. Friends recalled her love of running, of routine, of quiet mornings that offered space to think. These recollections stood in contrast to the violence that ended her life, anchoring her legacy in who she was rather than how she died. The broader implications of the case continued to unfold quietly. Policy discussions led to incremental changes. Some reforms were implemented, others stalled. The complexity of balancing rehabilitation, punishment, and prevention remained unresolved. The case underscored how difficult it is to design systems that prevent every failure, even as the cost of failure remains painfully clear. For the city of Memphis, the kidnapping and murder marked a moment of collective reckoning. It forced residents to confront the limits of routine safety and the importance of community awareness. It also revealed the depth of empathy and solidarity that can emerge when tragedy strikes without warning. Years from now, the specifics of the investigation may blur for those outside the city. Dates may be forgotten, legal details may fade, but the underlying truth will remain. A life was taken during an ordinary moment. A family was changed forever. A community was reminded that safety is not static, but something that must be actively protected. The Memphis kidnapping and murder does not offer a neat conclusion. It offers reflection. It asks how societies protect their citizens, how systems are held accountable, and how communities honor lives lost without allowing violence to define them. Eliza Fletcher's story continues not because of the crime itself, but because of the impact she had and the questions her death left behind. In remembering her, the city remembers its responsibility to look honestly at risk, to demand accountability where it is due, and to hold on to compassion even in the face of irreversible loss. And that reflection, like the memory of Eliza Fletcher, endures. As the immediate legal process concluded, the case entered a quieter phase, one that unfolded largely away from cameras and headlines. This is often the point when public attention drifts, but for those living with the consequences, this is when the reality fully sets in. The absence of daily updates does not signal healing. It signals endurance. For Eliza Fletcher's family, life continued in fragments. Everyday decisions carried new weight. Routines had to be rebuilt around absence. Friends and extended family stepped in where they could, offering stability and support, but grief remained deeply personal. Those closest to Eliza spoke of moments when her presence felt almost tangible, followed by moments when the finality of her absence became overwhelming. In Memphis, the case continued to influence how people moved through their city. Early morning runners adjusted habits, choosing busier routes or running in groups. Some stopped altogether. What had once been a symbol of discipline and peace became, for many, a reminder of risk. This shift was subtle but widespread, altering the texture of daily life in ways that statistics could never fully capture. Local officials faced sustained pressure to demonstrate that lessons had been learned. Reviews of parole oversight and supervision protocols were conducted, and findings were shared publicly. These reviews did not point to a single catastrophic failure, but rather to a series of gaps that, when combined, created opportunity for harm. This type of conclusion was both sobering and frustrating. It suggested that the system had not collapsed outright, but that it had not been strong enough to prevent tragedy either. Criminal justice experts weighed in on the broader implications. Many emphasized that cases like this highlight the tension between rehabilitation and public safety. Systems are designed to balance second chances with risk assessment, but those calculations are imperfect by nature. When failures occur, they are often judged harshly in hindsight, even as similar decisions are made every day without incident. These discussions were not abstract for Memphis. They were grounded in the knowledge that a real person had paid the ultimate price. Eliza Fletcher's case became a reference point in policy debates not because it was unique, but because it was painfully relatable. It involved no extraordinary circumstances, no high-risk behavior, no warning signs visible to the public. That ordinariness made it unsettling. Educators and parents across the city used the case as a catalyst for difficult conversations. Children asked questions that had no easy answers. Why did this happen? How can we be safe? Adults struggled to respond honestly without instilling fear. Many chose to emphasize awareness rather than alarm, acknowledging risk while reinforcing the idea that community and vigilance can reduce, though not eliminate, danger. Mental health professionals observed a rise in anxiety-related concerns, particularly among women and caregivers. Hypervigilance became more common. What had once been background noise, the sound of a passing car, footsteps nearby, took on new meaning. Therapists worked with clients to distinguish between healthy caution and debilitating fear, a line that can be difficult to navigate after trauma touches a community. Within law enforcement, the case prompted renewed focus on rapid response, interagency coordination, and post-incident support for officers. While the investigation had been resolved efficiently, leaders acknowledged that emotional recovery for those involved would take longer. Training programs increasingly incorporated not just tactical readiness, but psychological resilience, recognizing that long-term effectiveness depends on both. As years pass, the story of the Memphis kidnapping and murder continues to exist in layers. For the public, it may surface occasionally in discussions about safety or justice reform. For those who lived through it directly, it remains present in ways that are quieter but no less powerful. Certain streets, certain hours of the day, certain routines now carry memory. Eliza Fletcher's legacy has been shaped deliberately by those who loved her. Rather than allowing her name to become synonymous only with violence, they have emphasized her role as a teacher, a mother, and a person deeply invested in the lives of others. Acts of remembrance have focused on education, community, and connection, values that defined her life far more than the act that ended it. This intentional framing matters. How societies remember victims influences how tragedies are understood and responded to. When the focus remains on humanity rather than horror, it creates space for reflection instead of fixation. It allows grief to coexist with dignity. The Memphis case also serves as a reminder of how interconnected systems truly are. Public safety does not exist in isolation. It is shaped by education, mental health access, economic stability, criminal justice policy, and community trust. When any of these elements weaken, the effects ripple outward, sometimes in ways that are not immediately visible. Despite these complexities, one truth remains clear. The responsibility to learn from tragedy does not end when a case is closed. It continues in policy rooms, in classrooms, in neighborhoods, and in private decisions people make about how they live their lives. The story of Eliza Fletcher is not one of inevitability. It is a story shaped by choices, systems, and circumstances that intersected at a single moment in time. Understanding that intersection does not undo the harm, but it does offer an opportunity to reduce the likelihood of similar harm in the future. As this documentary draws toward its conclusion, it leaves behind more questions than answers. That is not a failure of storytelling. It is an honest reflection of reality. Some losses cannot be resolved neatly. Some wounds do not close fully. What remains is the obligation to remember, to examine, and to act with intention. The Memphis kidnapping and murder stands as a solemn reminder that safety cannot be assumed, that systems must be scrutinized continuously, and that compassion must guide both response and reform. It also stands as a testament to the enduring impact of a single life and to the communities that refuse to forget. Eliza Fletcher's story endures not because of the violence that took her, but because of the meaning she held for others. In remembering her, Memphis continues the work of honoring life, confronting loss, and striving for a future shaped by awareness rather than fear. And that work, like memory itself, does not end.